Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Matt Garvey. We are here to talk about making comics today, and in today's video I'm going to show you how to write dialogue for the characters that are in your comics. Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Matt Garvey and I'm a comic writer from the UK. Over the last 7 or so weeks, I've been sharing my comic making process from start to finish. In this video though, we are going to focus on dialogue and how to write dialogue for the characters that are in your comics. If you're interested in learning about scripting and how you set out a comic book script, I covered that a couple of weeks ago, so I'll put a link in the description for that. If this is your first time to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring that bell so you don't miss out on any of my future videos. But as I said, this video is purely about how to write the dialogue that goes in them little thought balloons, something like this. So let's crack on. Okay, so last week I did a video about common mistakes that new comic writers make. I'll put a link in the description of that one as well, because if you've already seen it, I don't want to waste your time. I want to crack on. But one of those problems that I mentioned that I see in a lot of scripts from new comic writers is when a new writer puts way too much dialogue on the page. And this is a problem because it covers up too much of the art. And if you are wanting to write, long monologues and long conversations going back and forth, comics isn't the right medium for that. If that's something that you really want to do and you're really passionate about, maybe look towards screenwriting or maybe playwriting, because comics doesn't really lend itself to that. So what I do is when I think I need to write dialogue and I don't want it to be too long, what I do is I use what I call my Twitter rule. Up until about 2017, what you could do is the amount of characters you could use on a tweet was around 140. I mean, it's now gone up to 280, but when I was writing dialogue for a character, I would take what I wanted that character to say, and then I would go onto Twitter and I'd paste it into a tweet, obviously not send it, but if that tweet was too long to be sent, I would know in my head that it's way too much dialogue for that single panel. So what I would do is I would go and rewrite it. So what I do is, if it's too long for Twitter, it's too long for a comic. So even though now, a tweet you can put up to 280 characters, I think, if I'm wrong, keep me honest in the comments. But when I still do it. So when I write dialogue, I will type out what I want a character to say. Then I will go on Twitter and I'll put it in there. And if it takes up more than half the box, I know that I need to rewrite it. So if it's longer than 140 characters, cut it off, and then I rewrite it. Okay, so the next point about writing dialogue is how do you make your dialogue sound natural and not clunky? And this is a really easy one. What you need to do is you need to say it out loud. And I know that sounds crazy, but I heard, I'm not going to take credit for this one. I heard Grant Morrison talking about this on Kevin Smith's Fat Man on Batman podcast, and it works. And, you may sound crazy when you're doing it, or you may sound like someone, practicing a one-person play, doing voices and, talking about multiple characters, but trust me, it does work. So what you need to do is just read your dialogue once you've written it. If it sounds natural when you read it out loud, it's going to read natural when it's on the page. So do it. It works. Again, trust me. Say it out loud. If it doesn't sound right, rewrite it again. But if it sounds great, you're on to a winner. Also, when it comes down to having your characters sound natural when they're talking, what I do notice from a lot of new writers is every now and then they try and be a little bit too cool when it comes to writing their dialogue, which I know sounds strange because if you can write cool, snappy dialogue, you know what, do it. But you've got to be able to do that for the entire issue or for the entire graphic novel. And what I tend to notice is a writer will have two characters, chatting away, having a conversation that works for the story, works absolutely fine. Then they would try and force, a cool bit of dialogue in there. And it makes it sound so unnatural and it's so out of place and it distracts from the story. So, sometimes trying to be too cool can hurt your script. So keep it simple and, just do what serves the story best. So, don't try and be Quentin Tarantino, basically. Which leads me to dialects, because I see a lot of new writers try and write characters with accents, and a lot of times it's really distracting and sounds quite cliched because they have all their characters talking normally, and then they'll remember a cool line that they've heard in The Sopranos or Goodfellas or something like that, and they will try and use it, and again it just throws the reader right out, because if you can't write the patterns of speech of that dialogue for the entire issue, again, I've said it before on this video and I'll say it again, if you can't do that for the extended period of time and make that sound natural, don't do it. If you want a great example of a writer writing specific dialogues perfectly and doing it through the entire series, check out Preacher by Garth Ennis and Steve Dillon. And if you haven't read it, no shame on it, but I'll put a link in the description to check it out, because it is a masterclass of storytelling, and the words and the pictures go together perfectly. Now, if you've never read Preacher, again, there's no shame in it. But Garth writes a character in that book called Cassidy, who's an Irish vampire who speaks with a full-on Irish accent. And for the entire 60-issue run, that character does not drop that accent. And yes, he sticks out compared to the other characters in that book. But the accent is so authentic. You believe it and you read it, and when you read it, you hear that twang in his voice, you hear that Irish accent. And why does this work so well? Well, because Garth's from Northern Ireland, so he can write an Irish accent. He knows the patterns of the speech. It's the same reason why a lot of my characters are either from England, or my comics are set in London. It's because I'm from London, so I'm writing to my strengths. I know how to write the patterns of the speech from the characters from where I live, so that's what I work to. So unless you can do accents justice, and you can do it full on, and it sounds perfect, just keep it simple, make it sound natural, because that will serve your comic best, rather than trying to do something that sounds way too cool or way too cliched. So again, just keep it simple. So now we're going to talk about profanity. That's right, swearing. We're going to talk about swearing, you bunch of... But you need to ask yourself, does your comic really need to have swearing in it? The reason I mention this is because time and time again, I will read the scripts or even the actual comics of new comic writers, and they force so much swearing in because, one, they think it sounds cool, and don't get me wrong, swearing can be cool sometimes, or they will put it in for no other reason than that they can. And unfortunately, the more profanity you add into your comics is you're just limiting the audience that you can actually sell your comics to, because if your comic has no swearing in, pretty much, depending on the themes of the comic, if it's not too adult, but if you're not putting swearing in, like, you can sell it to kids. Or, if you are putting swearing in, you're kind of narrowing the audience. And I learned this the hard way, because at Comic Cons, pretty much all my comics used to have swearing in them, and then it kind of hit me as like, I've got nothing to sell to kids when they come to my table, and I get parents come to my table and the kids can't look through the comics. So what I did was I started to think, well, that doesn't need that, and that doesn't need that, and I even started writing some kids comics as well, just so the kids have got something to look at when they're at the table. So when you're writing your scripts, ask yourself, does it really need it? What is this adding to the story? Because if it doesn't need it, don't put it in there, because you're limiting yourself. Okay, so let's talk about rewriting your dialogue, because I am constantly rewriting my dialogue. On occasion, I've rewritten dialogue, like 10 minutes before I've sent, a file off to the printers to be printed. I mean, I can do that because, I letter my own comics, which I'll talk about in another video. But the reason why I'm constantly rewriting my dialogue is because I always think of something better for a character to say after I finish the script. And, a lot of times, when I do my second drafts and my third draft, a lot of times the dialogue tends to be whole dialogue. It's what I want the character to say, but sometimes it doesn't sound like the character is going to sound at the end of the day. And I also do it because I want the artwork to come back before I do a final rewrite of the dialogue, because what I've written on the page may not match what's happening in the images perfectly. So for example, sometimes I've written dialogue for a character, and when the artwork's come back, the artwork's been so good that the dialogue doesn't need to be there. And that's a great sign of of an artist and a writer working really, really well together, because you should be able to take the dialogue out of a comic and a reader should be able to follow what's happening on the page. So on that occasion, when I see like a panel of a character that's expressing what's happening without having to say it, I'll have to take that bit of dialogue out. But then what I will have to do is I'll have to rework the page. So I'll need to rewrite what certain people are saying before and after, so that actually matches. So constantly rewrite your dialogue. Always think of better things to say, and have that in mind when you're writing it. Just because you finish your script doesn't mean that's the last you're going to rewrite it. So when those pages come back from the artist, have another look at the script with the art together and see if you can write something that matches that art perfectly. And then if you can do that, you're onto a winner. Okay, so let's talk about the dreaded writer's block when it comes to writing dialogue, because it happens to us all. You know, we'll be sitting there and we'll be like typing away. I mean, I'm assuming you type like that as well, like I do. But you know, you'll be writing that pivotal scene, you know, where character A meets character B for the first time, and you don't know what you want them to say. You know what you want them to say, but you don't know how to get them to say what you want them to say. It's very common. It happens to us all, you know, and there are exercises that you can do to help that dialogue flow naturally. One of those exercises I heard from Brian Michael Bendez a few years ago on a podcast, I believe it was called Let's Talk Comics, and this is brilliant. I use this all the time if I get stuck. What he tends to do is he'll open up a new Word document, and what he'll do is he'll put character A and character B sitting opposite each other, you know, with a table in between, and he'll just start writing. You know, he'll start with, you know, very clunky dialogue, you know, like, how are you, I'm fine, blah blah blah, or I hate you, blah 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 blah. And what happens is, as you tend to write the characters and the dialogue starts to flow and the momentum starts to flow, the conversation flows. So then you can kind of steer that conversation to what you want it to be in the scene that you're writing. And then once you're in the midst of writing that scene, you know you can cut it there, and once the scene's over you can cut it there, and then you have the dialogue for your characters. Or you might have warmed them up so much from that, you know, that very generic conversation that you go, I know what I need to do, I can go back to my script because that's how it's going to work, like that. So it is an exercise, it works, I do it, you can do it. So if you ever get stuck, don't worry, there are ways around it, okay? And that's another video done, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you found that useful and interesting. If you have any specific questions about writing dialogue, you know, stick them in the comments section below, or, you know, drop me a DM on Twitter, because I'm here to help. I'm trying to help you guys make your first comics, because, you know, I keep saying it, you know, if I can make comics, anyone can. And I will see you in the next video. You take care of yourselves, and I'll see you soon.